This is a Chucky Beat production.
Has speak to your product real quick, please.
I make the comic Malice in Ovenland. It's a fantasy adventure comic about a young girl who ends up getting more than she bargained for when she finds herself wishing for summertime fun and when she's stuck in like a sea of chores and she ends up in a whole other world. I also do a comic called The Anansi Kids and the All Saints Day Adventure. It takes place in the West Indies and it celebrates Caribbean folklore. And that's all for now.
So I have 4 graphic novels out right now. I mentioned them earlier. EXO, The Legend of Wally Williams, is a superhero sci-fi that takes place in a futuristic Lagos, Nigeria, where I was born and raised. The second book is Malaika Warrior Queen. It's a historical fantasy that takes place in a 15th century West Africa. So you get to see what Africa looked like in the 15th century and how an African queen ruled an empire and defended it against threats, both inside and internal and external of the empire. The third graphic novel is The Windmaker, and it's a combination between an art book and a storybook, and it's actually inspired heavily by West African mythology. I also have Malaika One Shot that's coming out for Halloween Comic Fest, so please go out and support your local comic book store. It's going to be for free, as well as a ton of other free stuff on Halloween Comic Fest, October 28th.
I have several books. I have 2 with me, but if you want to check them out, Micheline and I are at booth 341. The first book is Eating Vampires, and that's about a young girl who's the last of her people and the only cure for a vampire virus outbreak, for those in the back that can't see. And I have Ice Witch. Ice Witch is about an assassin. She gets married, has a child. Now the company's after her baby.
Oh, wow.
Bad chicks, man.
All right, so I do a comic called Bounce, for those of you who can't see, right? And it's basically about, I worked as a bouncer in New York for about 12 years, and I have a lot of stories about drunk people in the city. and every time I would tell them a story about what I went through the night before, I'm like, yo, you should really write about that, man. And I'm like, nah, ain't nobody want to hear that shit. But, oh, sorry, didn't go.
No, we're rated R here. I don't think we have any
okay.
kids. I don't see any little ones.
No,
I do see one little one. I'm sorry.
Okay.
PG-13 in the back. All right, come in hands. We're going to bleep that out on the edit of the
I'm sorry.
film. We're going to take that out. Take that out.
That's what bar life does to you. But basically, the story revolves around a dude who calls himself the Bouncer. Since there's such a huge Doctor Who fan, call him like the Doctor, the Bouncer. He has this little thing called the Time Nullifier that allows him to travel between time and space, only between bar bathrooms though. And he has to get really drunk before he does it. So the entire comic is a comedy, slice of life kind of thing. Each strip is a standalone strip. Sometimes they come together and it's like a little bit of a saga. You know, you got one where a dude's trying to take over the bar, or you got. I'm currently working on a story right now where the bouncer versus the quote-unquote alt-right or the Proud Boys or whatever. So it's like there's a alt-right bar that opens up across the street. Now they have to go up against this opposing force or whatever. But yeah, it's your basic Cheers meets Family Guy meets Rick and Morty, but black people. That's all it's happening.
And reflect me, whoever that me is. You are absolutely correct that when diversity is not just black or brown people, and you're right, the most obvious one that comes to mind is the Oscar So White controversy. For some reason, that Oscar So White, for some reason, just meant there's not enough black people. And then no one was talking about Latinx, no one was talking about Chinese, Korean, Japanese, no one was even distinguishing between that. No one was talking about, LGBTQ, no one was talking about disabled, no one was talking about Romani or even Inuit. No one was discussing those because I think to mainstream, those look like subsets, so you're absolutely right. What we are stuck in is basically, when we're talking about diversity and having these conversations, we actually need to define them, because mainstream defines it as, hey, it's not a white guy. And there's so much more to it than that. Like, even on this panel, like, someone mainstream might come up and say, oh, it's all black people. But we got Haitian, Bermudian.
I'm from Egypt.
You know, there you go. Like, that's what I'm saying. We have, you know, African, like, so there are subsets and within all of these. And I think when it's pointed out, I usually, like I just did say, you're absolutely right. Let me explain what I need when I say diversity in this conversation. So I think it's important, and I'm just saying from a blogger's perspective and a writer and a journalist, that when you are describing something or a situation and you're saying this is about a diverse topic, you need to define the parameters of that diversity. Because otherwise you're gonna get dragged up and down Twitter.
Me as a New Yorker walking down the street, for the people that I see, when we have panels, our panels reflect our membership. And our membership is a coalition of ethnic women from around the world. So for us personally, it's about representation, whatever that might mean to you, whether it's LGBTQ, Black, white, East Asian, South Asian, North American, South American, Latin American. We just have that breadth of the membership sitting on the panel. So that's how we do it.
Oh, you know, I want to add, sometimes when we talk about diversity, you got to look at the writer's background. Not everybody's that deep. Not everybody's really thinking that far when they're writing. Because if you talk about Japanimation and animation, it's all Asians. And you know, sometimes as a writer, he writes about what's in his surrounding. If I live in an area that's predominantly Asian, and I'm Asian, 9 times 10, I'm gonna write based on the Asian background. So sometimes we are asking people to do something that they may not be thinking about, you know? So sometimes you have to bring that to them. And when I say, like for me, I live in a predominantly Black neighborhood. So everything I do, everything I embellish is Black. So, you know, I may see Caucasians, white people, I may see Asians, but that's not my story. So, you know, also you gotta, like she said, divine diversity. So for my story, is seeing me, is seeing the reflection. So sometimes you have to look at the writer who's writing the story and what's their background.